How are you? Can you hear me? Okay? All right. So I would guess that a few of you were there this morning. Is that right? Okay. So I'm just as glad to be here with you this afternoon, and especially since we're at the bewitching hour. Right? Anybody who would who's given the responsibility to give a lecture or a talk at like 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, like you're like a dead man, right? Because like half of you will want to be asleep in about 30 minutes, right? But it's okay because I've got really good vision, and when I see that you're falling asleep, I'm just going to talk about you. And since this is not just a session but a whole topic on shame, I'm going to have lots of fun talking about you. Don't forget that. You think I'm kidding. I am not kidding. It was Tolstoy who said it. Tolstoy who said that we were not created for work. We were not created to be successful. We were created for joy. We were created for joy. I wonder this question. I wonder how many of us, in the course of getting up this morning, the first, second, maybe 10th thought that came into your mind was, my goodness, I'm so excited to go out into the world in order to be the joyful expression of God in somebody's life today. I'm going to make somebody's day. I can't wait to do that. Yeah, not so many of us. Joy is something that's hard to come by, but something for which we were created. Imagine this. Imagine that you go home. Have you already had your fall break? Do you have a fall break here? You don't have, oh, they don't let you have a fall break. Oh, they're like, we're going to work them to the grindstone kind of college. This is what we do here at Biola. So, okay, so do they let you have a Thanksgiving? Where like for 12 hours, you go home, eat turkey, come home. Yeah, good. Christian education, love it. Okay. Oh, come on, I'm going to go back home to D.C. I can say anything I want, it's fine. Washington, D.C., right? You know I'm a psychiatrist, right? Do you know that I'm a psychiatrist? I do all kinds of problems. And because I'm from Washington, one of the really good things is I'm never going to be out of a job. Wait for it. Right? Because, do you know there's an election coming up? Oh, now you're awake. Right. There's an election coming up, and everybody's worried. Everybody's worried, which is really good for our business. I just want to say it's a good thing to be. So, how many of us, when we go home for Thanksgiving, if we get home, and I don't know if your best friend lives here with you at Biola or not, but if your best friend who doesn't live here, if you were to go home, and when you walk in your front door at home, not your parents, not your siblings, but your best friend was to be in your kitchen and say, I've been waiting for the last 3 days for you to come home, because I can't wait to see you. What would that be like? Would that be cool? No. Would that be a good thing? What if it was your 3 best friends? Yeah. Were you there this morning when I said that when we preach at our church, people talk back to the preacher? Okay, I'm just wondering what your memory is like here, because if I said that, if your 3 best friends were to be waiting for you and said, we couldn't wait for you to get home because we were that excited to see you. How many of us wake up in the morning with a sense that the world can't wait to see us? Not a lot of us. But that's what joy is about. We like to say that as far as newborns are concerned, every baby is born into the world looking for someone looking for her. Every baby comes into the world looking for someone looking for him. And it is that joyful expression of somebody coming to find us. And they're not coming to find us because we have problems that have to be fixed. They're coming to find us because they can't wait to be with us. That kind of joy is what energizes us then to go out into the world and explore all kinds of things. It begins when we're little, right? When we're first born, we're exploring that, like, this is my hand when I'm laying in the crib. You might not remember this, but there was a time when you didn't know what this is and you had to figure out that this is your hand. And then you went to exploring, like, around your house, and that these are the begonias, and this is the sharp corner that if you run around too fast, you'll cut your eye. And then you go to exploring all kinds of other things. You have friendships, and then you discover that this is a car, and you can drive it. And then you come and you discover friends here at Biola. We are always looking to be joyfully discovering things, but at the same time, at some point, that joyful initiative of discovery, of curiosity, of making things, of creating things, that joy gets interrupted. And I want to suggest to us that the thing that is most powerfully able to interrupt it in ways that ruin our lives is the experience of shame. We talked a little bit this morning about what that story was like for the snake and the woman in Genesis chapter 3. About how there they were, just living their lives, this first couple, wanting to create a world of goodness and beauty and joy. And into this world comes this snake that basically says, you're not loved nearly as much as you think you are. You're not really the person that you think you are. Joy is not to be had by you. God's intention is not just for us to obey him. God's intention is for us to live into a world of goodness and beauty and joy, and evil is not having anything of it. And how does it use shame to get there? Anybody here heard of a woman by the name of Brene Brown? You heard about it? Yes? Some of us know about Brene Brown. And Brene Brown is she's a professor at the University of Houston, and she's done a lot of work recently on this question of shame and vulnerability. And people will sometimes frequently ask me, because I wrote this book about shame, what do you think about Brene Brown's work? And I say, I think two things. I said, number one, I think we couldn't be more fortunate than to have someone like Brene Brown doing the work that she's doing. It's very, very helpful. And she's a brilliant speaker and author, researcher. It's great to have her. I said, but the second thing that really strikes me is this. When people respond to Brown's work, you would think that we've never heard of the idea of shame before in the history of the world. You'd think that, like, with all of the notoriety that she's gathered, that it's like, oh my gosh, like, there is this thing called shame, and we didn't know about it before 1964. It was just, like, we had no idea. And I want to suggest that the reason that we seem so surprised is because this is exactly how shame works. You see, 25 years ago, there was a guy by the name of John Bradshaw, and most of you would have no idea who this guy is, but he wrote a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. It sold millions of copies. He had a PBS special, and shame was on the front page for about 10 years. And then it left the building, and people stopped paying attention to it. And then Brene Brown comes along, and she has to do some of this work all over again. And I would suggest that 25 years from now, somebody else is going to have to come along again and help us discover shame for the first time. What is it about shame that makes it so effective? So, small engineering thing. So, I mean, the lights are bright for me. How many here drive automobiles with standard transmissions? Have you heard, like, do you know what a standard transmission is? Right? Okay, I'm just checking, right? So a standard transmission, it has an accelerator, it has a brake, but it also has a clutch and a gear shift, right? You have to manually shift the gears. And if you don't use your clutch when you're trying to change gears, or when the car is slowing down, what happens? It stalls. And does it and how does it stall? Does it stall like smoothly? No, like it jerks to a stop, right? That's how it happens. I want to suggest that shame is what happens to our neurobiological systems when we are moving from an accelerated phase to a braking phase without using a clutch. Imagine this for a second. Let's say that you are a 2-year-old, right? 2-year-old, toddler, and you are running for the street. And your parent, in order for them to get you to stop, yells, "Stop," in a loud voice. What that child is doing when they're running for the street is engaging a part of their brain called the sympathetic drive system. Now, some of you who study biology might know that the sympathetic drive system is the part of the brain that helps with the fight or flight portion of our experience. But it's not the only thing that it does. The other thing that the sympathetic drive system does is that it is active when we are curious and interested and creating life for ourselves, including wanting to run out into the street, including wanting to write a paper, including wanting to play basketball, including wanting to do lots of things in which we are interested, creative. Our heart rates are up, our blood pressure is up, lots of blood is going to the brain and the rest of the body. We are being creative in a whole host of ways. I come up with a new idea that I want to give to my other fellow colleagues or to my friends at school. I am creating, I am moving forward, and the sympathetic drive system is helping me to do this, and suddenly, something slams on the brake. And in your brain, the brake is represented by the parasympathetic system. Your accelerator, your gas, in your brain is the sympathetic system, and your brake is the parasympathetic system that slows everything down. It slows down your heart rate, it slows down your blood pressure, slows down the movement of your body. And we can activate the parasympathetic system in someone else when we say stop, which is what we do with our child when we want them to stop from running into the street. Does that make sense? Okay, you with me? Pretty neurological, like little lecture there. Here's what happens. If you say stop to the child, it's entirely possible that what you're going to want, that child will just stop. But it's also possible that that child may not stop, and you're going to have to go get them. But you see, when a child is running into the street, that's not the only time that someone finds a way to apply the brake to your brain's system. What happens if you are, did anybody here do you have to do group projects here in undergrad? You ever have to do group projects? Yeah? Yeah, okay, you love those, don't you? Yeah, especially when you're dealing with all the narcissists that are in your group, it's all great, yeah. So you're in a group, and the group has to come up with an idea for something, and you offer your idea, and someone says something to the equivalent of, "I think that's just lunacy." Or better yet, you say you offer your idea, and the group just keeps talking without even acknowledging that you've had an idea, right? Don't you love that, right? Essentially what happens in your brain when that happens is that someone has activated your parasympathetic drive system. Things slow down. Don't you just love the feeling that comes over you when someone just ignores you? You like being ignored? It's a great practice, right? Being ignored. When the brake is applied and there's no clutch, when there's no relational connection to apply the brake, the engine stops. Question. Anybody here in the last month ever had anything that's happened to them for which they've sensed, imaged, felt, or acted in a way that felt ashamed? Anybody felt shame in any way in the last month? Anybody? Yeah, a number of you. If you're not raising your hand, you're lying. Okay, in the last month, right? All right, number one. What about in the last week? Right? Right? Yeah. What about in the 15 minutes before you came in here? Right? All right, we have these. Here's the thing. We all kind of know what it is. What we're not all that aware of is how often the phenomenon of shame has been started in us and practiced in us from the time we were little, because in some way, shape, or form, we had some experience in which our engine decelerated without the application of the clutch. And what is the clutch? The clutch amounts to an attuned relationship with another human being. So if a parent says to a child, stop, but the parent immediately goes over and gets the child and pulls the child back in a way that is kind and careful for the child's brain is not rendered traumatically. If someone says to us about our idea in our group project, can you tell me more about that? I think I don't quite understand that. I'd like to know more about that. Even though in the back of their head they're thinking like, I don't know if this is going to work. We may put the brake on, but we do so in such a way that we are keeping contact with that person relationally. We're not simply cutting them off at the knees. How many of us have ever had experiences with people who've actually done that pretty well? We may have experiences in which people are able to say no to us, in which people are able to apply and activate our parasympathetic system without disconnecting from us. Here's a question. Who are the people in your life right now that are able to say no to you and at the same time maintain a deep connection relationally with you? We have a hard time hearing people say no without the sense that in the way that they do it, they're going to shame us along the way. You know what I mean? It's really hard to do because we don't have that much practice doing it. And so when this process happens in which our sympathetic system is activated in the absence of a connected relationship, that felt sense of what we experience is the very thing that we call shame. And we all kind of like know what it feels like. There's some, in fact, we've measured these things. We know what actually happens as far as the shame response is concerned. We know if anybody ever a dog can feel ashamed, right? You can see this with a dog. So one of the things that typically happens physiologically for us as human beings is that we put our head down, we turn our eyes away. We'll actually lower and turn our shoulders in. We will turn our entire body away from people as a way to disconnect our eye gaze and presence, because this is how powerfully undoing this emotional experience is. So the first thing that's important to know about shame is that it is not about some kind of abstract idea. It is first and foremost an embodied emotional experience. It is primarily about what we experience in our bodies in addition to what we're thinking or feeling in our minds. Here's another feature of shame. It is early and often out of the gate. Children can experience this phenomenon as early as 15 months of age, right? You don't have to have language. You don't have to understand things. I don't have to know why I feel shame. I can experience it because someone looks at me. I can experience it because of your body language. I can experience it because, like, while I'm giving a talk, you're falling asleep. All those kinds of things can activate this shame response, and I don't have to be all that thoughtful about it in the process. Here's another thing that happens. It tends to be pretty disintegrating for us. And by disintegrating, we mean that, like, what I think and what I feel and what I sense and what I do all get very disconnected from one another. I'm not able to think very clearly. I'm not able to move very easily. I don't have the capacity to be creative in the same way when shame is at my door. Another feature is that it doesn't just separate me from things within my own mind, it also tends to separate me from other people. It disconnects me from you at the same time that it's disconnecting functions of my mind from other functions of my mind inside of my own head. So it has this way of creating disconnection both within my mind and outside of my mind between you and me. The way we cope with this feeling then is that we tend to hide, a la the Garden of Eden, right? We hide. We find ways to turn away because I don't want you seeing these things that I feel, because what my brain anticipates, this big anticipation machine that sits on top of our shoulders, I anticipate that if I am feeling ashamed and I look at you, it's only going to get worse. Not only do I hide, and in the very hiding, I reinforce the very experience that I'm having right now. So I can have all of these different experiences, and they just become like a snowball effect. I feel shame, and then I feel shame for feeling shamed. And on it goes. One of the other features that we talk about from a biology standpoint is this. All living systems, and now with quantum mechanics, we would say, well, actually, everything in the world, whether it's living or not, but one of the hallmarks of living systems in the biological world is the effect of movement. We know that living systems are systems that have movement, even right down to paramecium, right? They have their little flagella on the back of them. Movement is taking place. One of the things that shame does is that it stops movement. It moves us into places of stasis. So it means, practically speaking, that when I'm in the middle of this, I stop having creative ideas. I stop even trying to consider having creative ideas. So it's kind of like this. If as a 10-year-old I walk into my dad with my test report and I say, here's my test because I have a 92 on my test and I want my dad to see it. And the first thing that he says to me is, hey, where's the other 8%? Chances are likely that in a room this size, like somebody here, that's your dad. That's been your dad. And when you decided you wanted to go to college, it was, well, why are you going to Biola? Why can't you go someplace else? I have a woman who was in my office who was upset because she had done everything she could possibly do to help her child get into the school of her choice. Had done everything, and the mother was really upset and distressed because her child, as it turned out, didn't get in. Now, what I was really more concerned about was the fact that her child was only 3 years old. I'm not making this up. Like, you can't make this stuff up. I'm a psychiatrist. Like, well, we could, but like, I'm not making it up, okay? Mom is worried that her 3-year-old ultimately is not just not going to get into the right preschool. It's not the right preschool, not the right elementary school, not the right middle school, high school, and just because like my child won't get into Yale. And I'm like, thanks be to God, right, that your child's not going to get into Yale. But you see what this is like. This is this sense in which eventually, like when I feel this kind of shame, I don't know how to move and be creative because it induces stasis, a lack of movement. We know what this is like. When we feel ashamed, we get back a bad test score. We've had a friend who's been dismissive of us. We feel this pain of, I'm not going to go stick my neck out and develop other friendships again. Like, who would do that? Like, I'm not stupid. I might be ashamed, but I'm not dumb. And then here's the last thing, one of its features. The notion of condemnation is really kind of the hallmark of how shame operates cognitively. And by condemnation, we mean we all in this room have had thoughts of, I should have done this, I should have done that. If only I'd done this, if only I'd done that. Now, we might not be in our minds saying things that are horrible to ourselves, but we don't have to. We're so well practiced at being self-condemning that we then export this to other people, right? The people who are condemning of others, you can count on it, don't begin with that. When you've been condemned or shamed by somebody else, you can know that that's coming directly first from their own sense of self-condemnation. Why is it that Paul makes such a big deal when he opens his magnum opus passage of the 8th chapter of Romans? Why is it that he says, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus? Because like in the chapter before this, he basically says, like, look, the stuff I'm supposed to do, I don't do. The stuff I'm not supposed to do, I do it. Like, I'm a schmo, right? That's like paraphrase, right? What does it mean for us to walk around with all of this condemnation going on? And here's the thing, by the time we're your age, you're already well practiced at it. You don't have to like get up in the morning and say, oh, I just got to make sure that I condemn myself at least 17 times today. Like, you don't have to think of it. You don't have to make yourself do this. It's just automatic, right? Madison Avenue is more than happy to help you out. You see the picture, I'm not pretty enough. You see this, I'm not that enough. I don't have this, I don't have that. Everyone said you don't have, you need this, you need that, because like without it, you clearly are not enough. And I don't even have to have language for this. I can just feel it. I can sense the condemnation that I am having to push off every day, all day. It's as if we walk around with our own personal shame attendants. Imagine for a moment that you woke up this morning and sitting there, already dressed and ready for work, is your personal shame attendant. You've hired them. They look great. They look better than you do, which is why you need to be working on this, okay? And they're there to remind you of everything that you have done or about to do that isn't up to snuff. You walk into the bathroom and you see your hair, and you're like, oh man, right? And it's like, oh, it's another 5 pounds, one way or the other. It's another this, it's another that. And of course, here's the thing. We are working our tails off to make sure that nobody else knows that our attendant is around. We're working really, really hard to make sure that nobody sees that I think that I'm not smart enough. We're working really hard to make sure that nobody knows that I'm not fit enough. That nobody knows that I'm worried that I'm not going to be married. That nobody knows that I don't know what to do with faith. I mean, heck, I'm in this bastion of Christian experience here, right? And what if I'm the person who really doesn't know, either I don't know what I think about this stuff, or I flat out know that I don't want to have anything to do with this. What am I going to do about that? What are we to do? What are we to do? Furthermore, as we said earlier this morning, if you look in the literature, and you were to read about shame, there's all kinds of interesting neuroscientific research data out there about the neurobiology of it and what happens in social systems and so forth. One thing that you will not see, you'll see, is that in the literature, the writers talk about shame as if it's an artifact. They write about it like it's a virus, like it's something that happens to be in the world. If you read the biblical narrative, the Bible takes a very, very different take on this. The Bible would suggest that shame doesn't just happen to be in the world. Shame is the vector that evil is actively wielding to devour the world. And this is something else. Evil doesn't want to use shame just to help you feel bad. It wants to destroy you. And furthermore, it wants to destroy you on the way to destroying the entire universe. And you see, most of us don't wake up this morning thinking yeah, I got to keep in mind that I'm in the middle of a pitched battle. I'm in the middle of a war zone. Most of us didn't wake up and say yes, that's right. I do have to remember I have a bullseye on my chest. That anything of goodness and beauty and joy that exists in the world that is being worked toward by the Spirit of God is anathema to evil. And it wants to and will do everything it can in its power to use shame as a way to undo it. And you will be where it starts. Oddly enough, the vast majority of our experience with shame does not, as it turns out, does not happen in large, singular, catastrophic events. Being in a war, being raped, growing up in an abusive home. Those things do happen and they are tragic, but as we said this morning, the vast majority of how evil wields shame operationally is in the privacy of your own mind. Dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of moments every day in which your shame attendant is more than happy to remind you of how you are not enough. What are we to do? There is a New Testament letter written to the Hebrews. And in the 12th chapter of this letter, in the first 2 verses, the writer takes us through a journey that, if we pay attention to it, not only begins to open our eyes to what we can do about shame, but it puts us on a course for us not just about feeling better about ourselves, but about co-laboring with Jesus to create a world of goodness and beauty and joy that we talked about earlier today. And it goes something like this. Therefore, since you have before us such a great cloud of witnesses, we must throw off the sin that so easily entangles and distracts us and run with perseverance the race before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and now sits at the right hand of God. Therefore, since you have before you such a great cloud of witnesses, we talked about this morning. Here's another question. Who is your great cloud of witnesses? Who are the people who are bearing witness to your life? Who are the people by whom you are being deeply known? Who are the people to whom you turn and reveal the things about your life that, of course, you don't want anyone knowing? Who is your great cloud of witnesses? Here's an interesting thing about shame and guilt from a neurobiology perspective. Shame, as I mentioned, can emerge and develop as early as 15 months of age. Guilt, as it turns out, is something that, whatever it is that we give that term to, is something that doesn't start to emerge in children until they're somewhere around 3 to 4 years of age. If they're really sharp, maybe a little younger than that. But the reason that guilt doesn't emerge until later is because it requires more time for the brain to develop so that at least two things can happen. One is that a child actually knows that there are other people in the universe and that they're not one of them, right? That you are you and I'm me and we're different. And it takes time for my brain to develop enough for me to know that. The other thing is, I have to recognize that there is something that I've just done that isn't just wrong. Guilt is not just about my having done something wrong. Guilt is about my sense, my awareness, that the thing that I've done now puts you and me at risk. Are you with me? It's something that I do that I know, if I'm not careful about fixing immediately, is going to continue to widen the gap between you and me. And so I say to you, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And in fact, research on those people who feel guilt will tell you that people who experience that emotional phenomenon are likely to turn toward the person, more than likely to turn toward the person to repair this rupture as soon as they can. Because they have the sense that if I ask for forgiveness and you forgive me, we will be okay. Shame, it's just the opposite. If you feel shame, you do not turn toward the person. The very act of feeling shame means that if I turn toward you, it only heightens that feeling. I don't want to have that, so I turn away from you. If I feel guilty, I'm much more likely to be willing to come and find you and say, I'm sorry. Because there is a part of my brain that anticipates that if I say that I'm sorry, you can say, we're okay. And you have power to help me bridge the gap. Does that make sense? With shame, I don't have the sense that there's anything that can be done to bridge any gap, which is why this is the case. When someone is in the middle of feeling shame, they cannot find the cure for this by themselves. Neurobiologically, shame does not allow us to fix that problem by ourselves. If I'm in the middle of my shame, you have to come find me. My brain cannot know the healing and transformation from shame unless I'm in a community, unless I'm with a great cloud of witnesses whose intention is to regularly be in the practice of coming to find each other, because we know that it is our inclination to not be found when we've done something that evokes this kind of experience. And as we are in this great cloud of witnesses, we then begin already to reflect the Holy Trinity's life. Who are your great cloud of witnesses? Since we have this great cloud, then we should throw off the sin that so easily entangles us. There's one translation that says, the sin that so easily distracts us. Here's something to know. In our field of interpersonal neurobiology, we talk about the significance of the process of attention. We like to say that, attention is the ignition key of the mind. You turn it on. Nothing that you do, is ever done without a shift first in your attentional mechanism. Most of us in this room spend, myself included, spend a lot of our life on autopilot. We're not paying attention to what we're paying attention to. We simply just go where the wind blows us. What's interesting is that it would appear that all sin begins with distraction. How well are you paying attention to what you're paying attention to? We said earlier today, the things to which I pay attention become that which I remember, and what I remember becomes my anticipated future. Therefore, let us throw off the sin that so easily distracts us. Now, there is this too, this notion of sin and throwing it off. So here's the thing. There are a lot of things that we do in life in which our very actions are like helping the devil, as it were. We're like being his assistant. Like we have our own shame attendant, we're going to help our shame attendant out, in that there are certain things that we continue to do that only reinforce our shame. There are certain things, certain behaviors to which this scripture says we have to say no. There are certain things that we have to stop doing. Now, it raises this question for me. Like, I don't get it. In the Garden of Eden, I'm told, I read, in the Garden of Eden, God plants two trees, right? The tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then he says to the first couple, like, don't eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Do I have that right? Like, he said no to that. I'm thinking, like, look, if you really don't want these people to eat from this tree, why do you put it in the middle of the garden? Like, it's a little weird. Like, I would think that if you don't want them to eat of the tree, like, look, about 40 miles to your west, in a bunch of bushes, there's this tree. It's not very attractive. If you happen to come upon it, just keep going. No. He puts it in the center of that which he has created. Here's a question. What is it that is at the center of your life to which you repeatedly say yes to that continues to create shame for you that God is asking us to say no to? Throw off the sin that so easily entangles and run with perseverance the race set before us. Perseverance, it's about practice. And we like to say in my world, in brain language, like, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Rules of neuroplasticity go something like this. Neuroplastic change, like those neurons that fire together, wire together. And the way that I most effectively wire my brain in ways that I want is if I'm practicing small things frequently rather than large things infrequently. If you really want to become good at the piano, even if you're not going to be a concert pianist, you're far better to improve your skill if you practice for only 15 minutes a day, every day of the week, than practicing for 2 hours one day a week. It's how the brain works. That's why when it comes to combating shame, it means that we must be at this over and over and over and over and over and until we're dead. But you know what? Like we live in America. Like we want McDonald's spirituality. I just drive through, I get it, I pay for it, and like I'm good to go, right? The notion that we would have to work hard at this is not something we find to be very attractive. Name me one thing in the world, whether man-made or otherwise, that is long-lasting, sustainable, and a thing of beauty that did not take a long time to construct. If we're practicing for heaven, then we must practice for heaven. Practice. We persevere. But we don't persevere by ourselves. This is the other thing. We are far more likely to do even hard things well and practice them over time if we are not doing them by ourselves. If we are doing them in community, in this collection of this cloud of witnesses that are practicing the hard things, that are practicing hearing someone say to us, well done. Hearing someone say, no, I hear that place where you're feeling ashamed. But I want to tell you something different and better about who you are and who we are. When I am practicing this in community, my brain is more likely to make sustainable changes of the kind that I want. Tonight, we're going to talk about how all of this makes a difference in terms of what your vocational calling is. You see, because for most of us, shame isn't just about feeling bad about myself. Shame isn't just me feeling bad about somebody else. Shame and evil's use of it primarily is about making sure that I don't ever become the creative agent that God has destined me to be. And if I don't create, goodness and beauty and joy are not showing up. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. What does it mean? What does it mean for us to watch what he did and then do what he did? When Jesus was at his baptism, when you read this in the Gospels, he heard his Father say, "You are my Son, whom I am well pleased and in whom I love." Now here's a question for us. How many of us this morning, when we woke up, and you saw immediately the Holy Trinity in your dorm room? You saw them there, right? You see them? Like you were really asleep, right? You didn't see the Holy Trinity. They were there. I will tell you that they were there. The question is whether or not we're paying attention to what we're paying attention to. And now, for those of you who pulled all-nighters, this wouldn't be true because you weren't sleeping. But if the Holy Spirit, if you saw the Holy Trinity, you wake up and they say, "I have been waiting for you all night." Can you imagine? Imagine this. Imagine in those moments, in the same way that Jesus heard his Father with the descendants of the Holy Spirit saying, "You're mine. I cannot believe I get to be your dad." Imagine this. Imagine the last time you were in the middle of a moment in which you were covered with shame, inside and out. And imagine what it would have been like if in that very moment, suddenly you feel a hand on your shoulder. You've done something, maybe you've really done something you shouldn't have done. It's hard. But maybe you're just feeling, so maybe you're like the recipient of somebody else's anger, somebody else's shaming expression. And in the moment, you feel somebody's hand on your shoulder and you turn and you see some 35-year-old Palestinian dude in blue jeans and a t-shirt who looks you square in the eye and says, "We've got this. I can't wait to see what you and I are going to do in the next 5 minutes." You see, most of us aren't practicing paying attention to the fact that the Holy Trinity's intention is for us to be that aware that Jesus is this serious about being our brother, this serious about telling us day in and day out, "You are mine, and I can't believe I get to be your God. You are mine, and I could not be more proud to be your creator." What Jesus hears at his baptism is what God has been saying to every single one of us in this room, what God has been saying to every human on the planet for as long as this planet has been around. It's just that Jesus was listening. Jesus was paying attention to what he was paying attention to. If we aren't doing that, it will be difficult for us to then act like Jesus acts. But when we fix our eyes on Jesus, when we watch what he does, then we are able to do what he does. Tonight, we're going to get a sense of what Jesus does with Peter when he brings him back through in his reinstatement. What does Jesus do with Peter and his shame? And not just about helping Peter feel like we're okay, but really turning him loose vocationally to create in the way that he was born to create beyond being a fisherman. If we are sons and daughters, what then does it mean for us to do what Jesus did? So I find it's an interesting thing. So Jesus has his baptism, and if you've read the Gospels recently, and even if you haven't, immediately following his baptism, he leaves and goes into the desert. And if you're familiar with the story, you know that he went into the desert and he was tempted by the devil. Almost as if Jesus goes into the desert, he fasts for 40 days, and then the devil comes to find him. I want to suggest to you that in fact, it was Jesus who was going to find the devil. Jesus was going to find those very parts of him that would be tempted to be ashamed, right? Because when the devil comes to him and says, like, gosh, if you really were God's son, I think you would do this and this and this, rather than the things that you claim you're going to do. It feels very much like the same conversation that this snake had with the woman in the Garden of Eden. If you really are God's daughter, then I think he'd let you be like him, but apparently he doesn't want you to be like him. If you really were God's son, then you would turn these stones into bread. But apparently you're not. If you really were God's son, I think you would practice politics in the way politics needs to get things done. And that's with a sword. This whole peacemaking thing, come on. Are you serious? You're the ruler of the world, and you think this is how you're going to get the job done? Of actually ruling the world? I want to suggest that what Jesus was doing was going to find his enemy. In the same way we like to say, we keep our friends close and we keep our enemies closer. So here's something that you can do. Practical thing. It's what we call a shame inventory. And at first glance, you're like, oh, this sounds like fun. You get yourself, you're going to need a stack. You get yourself a stack of 3x5 cards. And every time you simply have a sensation, image, feeling, thought about shame, you make a mark. You simply make a mark. You don't need to write down where it came from. You don't need to write what it's all about. We just want you to make a mark, because in so doing, you are necessarily going to interrupt the neural network pattern that typically has you going down the rabbit hole before you even know you've gone. And then, in your circle of friends, your great cloud of witnesses, you're going to begin to talk about what those moments are in which you sense this shame, in order for those friends to redirect your attention to this fact, and that reality is that you belong to Jesus. And you see, we can't just know that we are God's son or God's daughter. We can't just know. Our brains don't do very well just knowing that. It's some kind of somebody tells you that, and so that's a fact, so somehow I just kind of believe that. I don't take that in very well. I need to see it in your eyes. I need to feel it in the touch of your hand on my shoulder. There is no other way. It would appear that for us to be fully known, for us to fully put shame to death over the course of our lifetime, for us to practice for heaven, it requires that we necessarily create spaces for clouds of witnesses, such that we can together persevere, watching what Jesus does, doing what Jesus does, in order to scorn shame when we see it, such that the joy of a world of goodness and beauty can be realized. My invitation is for you here at Biola to use your time and your relationships here to do that very thing, creating an outpost that undeniably will be that which the world will see and know that God is alive on the earth. You've been a lovely audience. I hope you have a lovely afternoon, and I will see you tonight. Thanks be to God.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.